I mean, we all know bad divorces of people who have not recovered from their divorces.
Some of the things that you recommend people talk about can help them avoid or reduce the possibilities of major sources of resentment and disconnection and misunderstanding later on if they do go through a separation.
I just really think that communication, listening, and talking about expectations and being honest with yourself are so core to being able to have relationships.
What are we really looking at here then? Are we looking at the legal resolution or the emotional resolution?
The strongest area that people probably need me in quite often is the financial area.
Divorce is really more about a transition. And this transition can either preserve or destroy emotional, financial, and relational stability, depending on how it's handled.
Some people say that divorce is number one. Other people say that death of a loved one is number one.
We've talked today about emotions. We have talked today about finances. So my question to you is, how would you define emotional wealth? Welcome everyone to the Emotionally Wealthy podcast. I'm so glad that you're here again today. As always, I like to start with a question that provokes thought or reflection. Have you ever noticed how quickly people shift during divorce? I mean, I've been through it, and I know that this feels hard to see somebody change, all of a sudden become reactive, maybe fearful, completely unlike themselves. Or, maybe this is you. Maybe this is you. People often enter divorce emotionally flooded and feeling unsupported, and a lot of times just unaware of the deeper emotional patterns that are shaping their decisions. So if you are someone that you know is considering divorce as an option, I invite you to listen in, because today's episode will absolutely open up a very different way about thinking about divorce. My guest today is Mikki McGill. Mikki is a certified mediator, transitions coach, and divorce financial professional who helps couples to navigate divorce in a way that aims to protect not only financial resources, but emotional well-being and long-term relational health. Her work centers on helping people have difficult conversations with more clarity, less destruction, and greater intentionality, especially when children are involved. Our conversation today is about how to move through one of life's hardest transitions without completely losing yourself in the process. Mikki McGill, welcome to Emotionally Wealthy. I am so excited that you're here. This is going to be fabulous talk.
Thank you, Karen. I've been looking forward to being able to continue our conversation that we just had one-on-one before.
Yeah, I was fired up after it in a good way because, like I mentioned before, I've been through a divorce. We did not use a mediator. And, sometimes I think, wow, it wasn't awful, but could it have been better if we had had someone like yourself? Divorce often exposes attachment patterns and conflict styles and fears around worth and control and money and all these things that we know are very prevalent in relationships anyway, but they just get highlighted in a different way when people are going through a divorce. What got you interested in this type of work? How did you even start?
A number of years back, I'd had a federal career in finance, but it was actually during my federal career. I was in grad school. I got exposed to alternative dispute resolution. And all the education that I've had, I was so pumped and so excited. I'm like, I want to do that. And so fast forward about, 10 years later, sometimes, that seed gets planted and it sits dormant or it gets watered or whatever it might be. During that time, I was doing foreign exchange, and I had become a host family coordinator while I was still working at the government. And
Mm.
I used those conflict resolution skills when I was working with American host families and foreign exchange students. And I was already at that time volunteering, doing volunteer mediation down at a small claims court with civil cases, working on just a bunch of different mediation volunteering as it. And I found that every time I came home, I was happier. I loved my husband better. I was just
Hmm.
I was just I was just uplifted by the work. And so I'm like, that might be it. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to check out family and see if that's a good fit because there are different areas to mediate in.
Yeah.
And I just loved it. But I really just enjoy so much working with families. And so it is such a joy and a privilege to be able to be in this space. And I genuinely have so much respect for the people that I work with that they are really the most courageous people that I know because
Yeah.
number one, they're looking at where am I right now and taking inventory and facing that, which is really scary and hard. And number
Yeah.
two, they're stepping into this space to um, take responsibility for their future and to make
Yeah.
decisions about their future, which is scary and tenuous. So I really, it's such a privilege to be here, but it was an unexpected journey, as most journeys are, I guess.
And so many times, right? It's not linear, as you can see
No,
from your
not at all.
experience, that you plan for something.
Mhm.
We think that we all have
Mhm.
all our ducks in a row, and then life throws a wrench.
Yeah.
So, Mickey, for people who are unfamiliar with mediation,
Mhm.
and particularly within the context of a potential separation or divorce,
Mhm.
um, what, just in the simplest of terms, what does a professional mediator do within the context of a couple?
Yeah.
And what would you say is the thing or the things that people misunderstand the most
Yeah.
about the process?
Great questions. So,
Yeah.
an attorney can give people legal advice. They can tell them what they should or shouldn't do. An attorney is an advocate for one person. So, number one, I can't tell people what they should or shouldn't do. What I can do is I can give them general information on how things work in divorce in Minnesota. That's the state that I work in.
Hmm.
And we're working together through a divorce. And then I'm not their advocate. That's an important thing to know. So,
Yeah.
an attorney is an advocate. An attorney can only represent one person unless it's like representing a company or something or other like that.
Yeah.
But in divorce and family law, an attorney represents one person. So I am not I would not be an advocate of one spouse or the other spouse or partner. What I'm specially trained to do as a certified mediator is I'm specially trained to be an advocate of their conversations, to help each of them show up the way that they want to show up and to have the best conversations that they can that day for each of the times that we meet. The
Yeah.
third way that I'm different than an attorney that I like to share is that I'm I don't help people fight. And so, attorneys or advocates, they're there, you're fighting over the same things. And there's going to be kind of winners and losers with that scenario. And it's not really an efficient process. I mean, a lot of people have anger and it's understandable. Everything's been, pulled out of under them as far as what's going to, what their future is going to be, maybe even the present. And there can be a lot of other things that are also attached to that, right?
Yeah.
Um, but if really the intention, if there's a strong desire to retaliate or to punish the other party, mediation really isn't a good fit. So that's the way I guess I like to explain kind of mediation. So um, as a general kind of concept. What I think people don't understand about the process. Well, first off, I think people a lot of times don't understand that there are choices in how they divorce. It is so easy.
Yeah.
It is so easy to go down and get a marriage certificate, right? But things get tangled, and we've all um, there is just history that kind of comes
Yeah.
up. And there's kids, if there's kids involved and so on. And so there are a lot of pieces. It's not just simple, or unfortunately, even the process is not intuitive. Well-intended people make some really serious mistakes sometimes that can be lasting, and that actually keep them from being able to heal and move on from their divorce, and just sow a seed of bitterness because their divorce didn't go well. Nobody got married thinking or planning to divorce down the road. Yeah.
I recently had a friend who, one evening I'm out with girlfriends, and we're talking about all things that, girlfriends talk about. One of them discussing some issues that she's having in her marriage. And then the next day we receive a communication from her. Oh, by the way, now I know why this is going on. I just got served. And she was completely blindsided. And, just emotionally, it's so traumatic. And the thing is that I think that people often think that they're making logical decisions during divorce, or like during the pre-divorce process, rather, while really underneath they're emotionally
Yeah.
flooded and therefore emotionally influenced. And I think it's obviously very normal to be emotionally influenced, but we also need to bring in some of that logic. What would you say is the best way to figure out whether mediation is the right path for a couple versus litigation versus a
Yep.
DIY divorce? There's so many factors
Hmm.
that we have to take into consideration. So from your point of view and from your experience,
Yeah.
what are some of the things that people should consider
Mhm.
when they're choosing which one of these paths to take?
Yeah. Yeah. I would really encourage people to have a conversation with an attorney, have a conversation with a family mediator,
Mhm.
and see how that feels. Either way, there are things that you haven't thought of, and having those conversations will help kind of tune in where you're at and what it is that you need. And I really would encourage you, where possible, to do those together if that's possible. If it's not possible, or if you're not comfortable with that, don't do it together. Do it one on one. Now, with the attorney, you'll have to do it one on one. But when it comes to the mediator, there is some benefit I get feedback from, and
Mm.
both parties being in the Zoom room with me, and those initial conversations, and them hearing the other party as I interact with them, instead of them just interacting with one another.
Yeah.
So there are things that you get clear on and dial in to determine what I mean. And then when I meet with people initially, I tell them there are three. This is a brief call. There are three major objectives. One is for us to meet and connect, which we're doing right now. Another is to determine if there are resources for me to connect you to. And the third is to help you determine what your next step is. So
Right.
it's really all about clarity, getting clearer, because everything is a mess. And it is important that, at least if since you are facing this, you don't want to have a bad divorce. I mean,
Yeah.
you want to navigate this in the way that fits you and your situation. And figuring that out, I think the best way to do it is to have a conversation. The strongest area that people probably need me in quite often is the financial area, because this is the single largest financial transaction that people will make in their lives. Okay. It's
Yeah.
more than getting married. It's more than buying your first home. It's more than going to school for a degree. It's more than a funeral. So
Um,
doing that financial piece, uh, not doing it yourself for most people is a better way to go right there.
yeah.
And it's one of the reasons I became a CDFA, a certified divorce financial analyst, because that financial piece, this is your one opportunity to get that right. The property settlement, for example, that is something that once it's done, it's done. It's kind of codified. And even spousal support, well, spousal support too. When it's done, it's kind of done. Child support is different. It's kind of a door that's always Correct. The state will always want to know that the kids are taken care of. So that child support door is kind of always open. And there are different kinds of property depending on your state and how things work. So the financial is an important piece. The emotional, though, is an important piece too. People take a long time to divorce. Even if you're surprised by it now, you're the one that's surprised and receiving it.
Yeah.
Um, the other person typically, and I don't know what percent, but it's a very, very high percent, has been thinking of this for a long time. This is
Yes.
something that is just popping up out of nowhere, unfortunately, as hard as that maybe hurts to hear. And so there is absolutely grief going on, there's grief going on in your periphery as well, and your connections and everybody else that's in your life that this will affect as well.
Yeah.
So I mean, the emotional is definitely a piece of it. I've had a family that I worked with last year that, oh my gosh, they cried. I don't know,
Mm,
most of the sessions that we were together, they cried through it. And we just made space for that because that's where they were at and what they needed. I mean, sometimes people are separated for a while before they make that call. Divorce isn't typically jumpers. People jump into marriage quicker than they jump out of marriage, from
yeah.
what I see of people that I work with. So that emotional is definitely there. There's no doubt
Yeah.
about that.
I'm curious, Mickey, where do you see that people are emotionally flooded the most, or what areas are the most difficult for people to make clear decisions during this process? Financial obviously is a major piece, but then there's also parenting decisions. Where have these been the most difficult times that people experience trying to make decisions logically or clearly, but they're really emotionally flooded and unable to do so without help or mediation, maybe?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to me, Karen, is one that actually hits both sides. It hits the parenting side and the child side that you were mentioning. When parents are really struggling and they're trying to stay together in the same home through their
Mm,
divorce. Um, and I've had a couple families that I don't like to do this, but I've had a couple families that I've tried to encourage them to separate now, because it's the conflict and the way that they're doing conflict and not getting a break from one another, even if they're living on different levels, even if
yeah,
they're trying to share parenting in the same house and not cross paths or whatever it might be. That having that space is so valuable to a lot of people to get some
yeah,
clarity on, and particularly to have a break from the conflict.
yeah,
Um, and it doesn't mean because people separate, it doesn't mean that they're going to divorce. I know that can be scary. For some, they're afraid of the financials kind of spinning. And they're afraid, how are they going to afford two homes and figure out this split and everything and all. And it's one of the reasons that I've recently started working with people facing separation with peaceful separation planning,
yeah,
because it is a really a conflict time. It's really hard. People don't know where to start. They don't know how to do it. It's in fact, in some ways I feel like I don't know if it's more stressful than a divorce. The finality of a divorce is really stressful, but
yeah,
just even those initial steps into and through the separation, it's really hard for families to face that. And families that have high conflict going on in their home, it really is a disservice to them being able to be emotionally regulated for themselves or for parenting as it
yeah.
shows up. And so, that's a really tough space, um, for people to be going through.
In your experience, can you tell us a little bit about what healthier um, co-parenting looks like?
Yeah.
It is my belief, by the way,
Mhm.
that co-parenting doesn't start after the divorce. My belief is that co-parenting starts before the divorce, because you are already co-parenting. Whether you were in a happy marriage or not, you are already co-parenting because you're bringing in different styles, you're bringing in different beliefs, you're bringing in different values that you grew up with,
Mhm.
and coming to a place of agreement around certain things. So I'd love for you to maybe talk to us about what you would recommend or what you see as ways that parents can protect their children emotionally during a separation, even when there's unresolved hurt or anger between
Mhm.
partners.
Yeah. Um, I guess I want to lead with this because it's not exactly about how to protect your kids, even. I think it's a piece of how to prepare yourself for living apart and co-parenting. Because you're right,
Yeah.
they've been parenting, throughout their marriage, and it's going to look different for how it looked during your marriage than how it's going to look later. Um,
Yeah.
a lot of times, okay. In divorce, we don't get to keep our kids full time anymore. And that's a really hard part for parents and I think for kids too to
Yeah.
face. But a lot of parents that I talk to, that is like one of the number one things that they are really aching about as much as they're scared about so many things is that they're not going to be able to tell their kids good night or, kiss them, in the morning to send them off to school and that's a really tough. It's important to understand that you're giving up some control, which is really hard, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to be in control of everybody who comes and goes in their lives as much as you did before. It's not this little cocoon that you can all hold together. And um, you're going to have to grow some skills around that to be able to navigate those times and to be able to show up as your best self that you can
Yeah.
as you grow into that newer role where you are sharing you are sharing your kids, but they have a different life in another home. There will be different rules, they may eat different things, so on and so forth. There's a movie out there.
Oh, that's so
It's called
interesting.
Split, Split is the name of it. It's an amazing film, and you hear from the kids' point of view, to the kids themselves. That was kind of the parent we were talking about, but to the kids' point of view, that movie Split, in both segments, is really helpful to hear what is going on for the kids, what they are dealing with, how they are, feeling about it. And research has shown that it's not divorce that is so harmful to kids, it's the ongoing conflict. If you're going to be living together through your divorce or whatever, you got to be able to manage the conflict and keep some kind of a cap on it to be able to navigate that. But if you are going to go through a divorce, at least deal with the stuff that you need to deal with and heal from and work through. Um, because otherwise, I mean, we all know bad divorces of people who have not recovered from their divorce,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So I want to make sure for our kids, we don't do that and that they're
Yeah.
put in that position. So I think the two pieces that come to my mind are this piece of understanding as a parent that whether you chose divorce or you're receiving this message or this decision from your partner, there is a transition that you need to make, that you and recognize to focus your energies on what you can control and how you can positively support the kids in this new situation that you have very limited control over.
Yeah.
And then secondly, to recognize what the kids are going through. And I really do encourage people to like watch that movie Split to understand that impact on them and what they are going through. And when people do end up repartnering at some point, the kids are not dating. That's not what they're doing. And so
Yeah.
I have a resource that if people are interested in, they could reach out to me about how to tell your kids that you're going through a divorce and the things that they need to know. And if they want to reach out to me at greatrivermediations.com, I'd be happy to provide that to them. It's going to take some growing and some new muscles that you're capable of growing.
Yeah. I think the biggest takeaway for me from what you've just said is, again, number one, that message that you actually can influence the way that you separate, the way that you divorce.
Yep.
Each person does have agency over how they handle things. The other thing that I'm taking away from what you're saying, Mikki, is that the way that people handle conflict during the divorce often started long before the marriage itself. So just being aware that maybe, a process like this can bring up some of those old rooted patterns,
Mhm.
and that you can actually
Yeah.
make some changes, because the process of the divorce and how it's handled 100% shapes the emotional future forward. Like, this movie that you're talking about, Split, these are the kids talking about this exactly, right? This
Yeah.
emotional future that we're not necessarily always thinking about 10 years later, right? I mean, I'm really curious to watch that movie and see what the outcome was with those kids. So all this being said, let's kind of move backwards a little bit and talk about what some of the premarital conversations couples can have. At one point in my practice, I saw couples with premarital issues. And that was a very big area of interest for me, because I myself had experienced a divorce. My husband and I, in my second marriage now, we went through premarital counseling, because there were some things that I felt like, hey, I feel like we're not communicating 100%. I know we want this to work. I know that we want to stay together, but these are things that are, they can only grow, and for the worse, right? So I'd love for you to maybe give us some insight for those people that are looking to get married. They're thinking about it. It doesn't even have to be married. Like, maybe they're going to live together. Maybe they're planning a life in a non-traditional way, but they're planning a life
Mhm.
together. So premarital, pre living together, whatever you want to call it. Can you talk to us about some of the things that you recommend
Yeah.
that people talk about that maybe can help them avoid or reduce the possibilities of major sources of resentment and disconnection and misunderstanding later on if they do go through a separation?
Yeah. Karen, this reminds me how so often at bridal showers, or however you want to put it, there'd be that advice, right? What is your advice for the happy couple, right? How do they make this a long term, make this work? And particularly from people who hopefully know.
Yeah,
And so, you get, don't go to bed angry at one another, you
that's
know,
not always possible, by the way.
yeah, it's not.
Just saying. Just saying.
It's so true. So, there is so much advice out there, and so many things. And I think there are people out there too who are so afraid to get married. It's not even just the people who are, people who are afraid to make that commitment. And so there's a question out there as, should they match you? And so even when you come to that, what I would recommend is discussing expectations and building communication, building open communication. You will run into situations where how maybe even you thought that you would be shows up differently. There will
For
be
sure.
inconsistencies of you in the relationship. There will be inconsistencies of them in the relationship. And so I really feel like discuss communication and discussing expectations, and that's an ongoing conversation. What were
Yeah.
you thinking in this situation? What was going on? Listening, those listening skills and communication skills and talking about expectations is so important to being able to stay on the right and stay on the track together. I mean, there's always best practices with this or that or the other, but I feel like that's the core key to the door
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
having positive, healthy relationships. And they're worth the investment. They're absolutely worth the investment. We pay a price for everything, whether we
Yeah.
recognize it or not. And sometimes the price we pay, um, emotional
Yeah.
vulnerability, and that's important.
When you brought up a vulnerability, it made me think about navigating narcissistic relationships or relationship dynamics, I should say. You work with clients to preserve financial, emotional, and relational resources during the process of a separation or divorce. But when you have narcissism or one partner that is on that spectrum, when we think about the dynamics around mediation and accountability and co-parenting, how do those narcissistic dynamics complicate those things from what you've seen?
Yeah. So I appreciate that you brought that up, Karen. Not because I have all the answers, because I certainly don't, but I would like to say it's somewhat of an experienced, or it's continually being educated opinion to some degree. I think it's important. Well, it's important that when you're in a relationship, whatever that relationship is, whether it's your mother or your sister or your partner or a friend, it's important to be honest and realistic about where the safety is in that relationship.
Yeah.
Whether that's emotionally, physically, whatever it might be. It's important to understand that and to be honest about that. And sometimes it takes us a while to get there because we're testing it and trying to figure it out. I have to be who I am. And there's a lot of identity involved in all of that, right? And so I think first we have to be honest about what's real and possible in a relationship and where we're safe. Whatever that relationship is, you need to honor the level of safety in that relationship. And that's where you show up with vulnerability, to the level of vulnerability that is allowed. And it's different in each relationship in our lives. Okay.
Yeah.
What makes divorces different that have a narcissist? And most narcissists are probably they're never going to be clinically diagnosed because they're not going to show up for that. They're not the ones looking for help. It's the partner or the other people in their life.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up, because that's an important point. Yeah.
At the same time, we all have narcissistic tendencies as well. And that's not to diminish. There's a spectrum. And that's one thing that I appreciate so much in the mental health field, that everything's a spectrum now. And we're all on the spectrum of something, somewhere. It's just, where are we on the spectrum? Are we way over here? Are we way over here? Are we somewhere in the middle? What is that? So given that, though, there are real problems in relationships that people have. Sometimes it's a problem of boundaries and our own identity and showing up and growing into that because of how we've been taught, the roles that we've been allowed to play. When it comes to navigating those, particularly in a divorce, they can be high conflict. You don't know what they're going to do, or maybe you do know you feel like you do know what they're going to do. And that's the terrifying part of it. It doesn't mean that people who are narcissistic cannot do mediation, but it's about motivation. It's about motivation for them. And motivation is very different for someone who is high on the spectrum or acting in that capacity than it is for someone who's more regulating. And it can be very challenging for this partner who's used to being in a particular role, whether it was from childhood and all the relationships afterward, or even, the dynamics of this relationship, to show up in this space. But it is possible. I've seen it.
Yeah.
And it's about then on this other person and their motivation and being able to be motivated to show up in a way that actually helps the family, the parties, to move forward with their lives.
When I help people try to decipher if someone in their life is narcissistic or just has narcissistic characteristics or qualities, which I agree with you that we all have, there are two things that I say to people. The first thing is, if there's something about them that is something you want to address, maybe the way that they're talking to you, or maybe the way they're handling things, and it makes you feel a certain way.
Yeah.
When you bring that to the table in a calm manner and say, hey, when you say things like that, or when you do these things, it makes me feel this way. The person who is not a narcissist will typically be able to acknowledge and adapt with a certain change.
Mhm.
right? That's one piece. The
Mhm.
other sort of litmus test, I'll call it, when you address or you ask about something, are they reacting and addressing, acknowledging what you say without becoming defensive or offended or becoming the victim? So I really can appreciate that differentiation. The other thing too that I wanted to mention was that what you're saying um, really comes down to, in my mind, having a mindset about winning in a divorce versus trying to move through it with intentionality and with healing and having a common ground around we both want this to be emotionally as safe for us, for our children, whatever the situation is.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, in your experience, Mikki, what happens? What tends to change when people move from that? I'm just trying to win
Mhm.
in this divorce situation to I want us to move purposefully, intentionally, and in the most healing way possible. What are some of the things that you have seen change when people take that approach?
So, one of the analogies that I've been considering lately is that divorce is a burn.
Yeah.
And I used to work with the Forest Service, and so they will do prescribed burns sometimes. These are controlled burns where they're going to say we're gonna clear this area so that it can kind of start fresh, and it's a new start and everything, but we're going to clear this. They will decide what are the boundaries of that burn, and this is the area that they're going to burn. The other
Mm,
choice I feel like in divorce is a wildfire, and just setting a wildfire and just letting it ravage and damage and take everything and consume it, right? People who are in that space, I don't know what turns them around. Okay.
yeah.
It might be running out of money where if the attorneys aren't showing up for you anymore. I've talked to people who have spent 250 and 500,000 on their divorces, and it wasn't a good divorce, believe me. This idea of winning versus intentionality, we're going to do this and we're going to get through this. This is a prescribed burn, so to speak. Um, when I work with families, I'm working with them for a set period of time that we're going to go through all the decisions that you need to work through. We're going to talk about those three buckets: the finance bucket, your property bucket. We're going to talk about how you're going to parent your kids and help you make decisions about those. And then that last bucket, the support bucket, whether that's spousal support, whether that's, child support. There are lots of people who are afraid of divorce, and I think very much should be. It's not something to just, say, "Oh, just let the attorneys deal with it." I'm not
Yeah.
saying that there's never a place for that. If you have a restraining order, you're gonna have an attorney to deal with that, okay? Or something like that. Um, and some people, even that are narcissists, don't wanna burn everything down. They don't wanna lose everything they have. In fact, they
Yeah.
wanna hold on to it and keep it.
Yeah.
And so there is it's that motivation again. And I don't know if we're still talking about narcissism, I guess, but we talked about the winning, and that isn't necessarily always narcissism. It can be
Yeah. Yeah.
competition, it can just be hurt and pain and betrayal, and wanting to show up for yourself when you haven't all these years, or at least not be taken to the cleaners and never recover and have to live in my parents' basement for the rest of my life. Will I be able to retire one day? I mean, there's so many different questions. We all get triggered, and divorce certainly provides lots of triggers to maybe lots of years even. And maybe, like you said, all the way back to our own stuff, right? That's really what's coming up. Bruce Feiler has a book called Life Transitions, and he calls them life quakes, these different life transitions, life quakes, which I just love
Mm,
terminology. And on the Richter scale of life quakes, some people say that divorce is number one. Other people say that death of a loved one is number one. So the
wow.
jury's kind of out, but you are going through a traumatic life experience, and it's important to take care of yourself emotionally, physically, all the ways that you can, so you can show up. for the process, because this is where some decisions are being made. And
Yeah.
it's important to show up for those and not just sign them over to somebody
Yeah.
else to make decisions for you.
Mikki, this has been amazing. There's so much valuable information that you've provided us here today. I have one final question for you. We've talked today about emotions. We have talked today about finances. So, my question to you is the one that I ask all of my guests. How would you define emotional wealth?
Mm. I would define emotional wealth as well-being, being well.
Mm,
And it's not just, I mean, our physical health, that a lot of people don't have, and it's something to be grateful for, whatever capacity that's in. It's really being yourself authentically and learning who that is as you grow. I'm still learning and figuring that out, and I hope that most people are as well. But being well with that and being well with where you are, because in the end, the things that are most important in life are things that money can't buy. And part of that is your peace, being well with yourself. And from that, we're able to show up in our relationships and in the spaces that we're called to, whether that's a parent, whether that's an employee, whether that's a sister or a daughter or a friend, whatever that might be. And those people in the world need us to show up in that space. We need ourselves to show up in that space. So being well, um, emotionally wealthy is really being well.
wonderful. Thank you so much. I know that you have resources for people to access. I know that there are people going through it right now who might be interested now that they have a new perspective and a new understanding about what your role is and what you do. What's the best way to get in touch with you for anyone
Yeah,
out there who is interested in reaching out?
sure. Well, there's two ways. Both are through my website, and that is www.greatrivermediations with an S.com. And one of them is that you can sign up for my peaceful divorce packet that I have. Another way is that you can set up a one-on-one where we could chat, and we could chat about support groups. I have a number of different support groups going for grief. Someone's for grief, some for separation, some for divorce, building resilience and coping skills. And so those are two ways through just kind of meeting and connecting and determining kind of what resource might be the best fit for you, including that how to tell your kids that you're facing a divorce.
Yeah, wonderful. Mikki McGill, thank you so much for being here on the podcast. And even though you're licensed in Minnesota, it is 100% worth going to your website and visiting because there are other resources that you can offer and that you do offer. And so I really want to encourage everyone to go ahead and still visit and contact. Even if you're out of state, you might be able to have some kind of consult where you can have some kind of direction and then go back and decide whether you want to look for somebody in your state where you live who's licensed to do this work.
Just to be clear, it's not a licensure. I have to say that because it's very technical here. But the support groups are around the United States, so they're not limited to Minnesota at all. Thank you.
Mikki, thank you so much for being here. I'm so appreciative. There's so many people that are going to benefit from this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. Great to visit again.
Absolutely. And thank you all for listening to the Emotionally Wealthy podcast. If this episode gave you insight, clarity, or a perspective that you needed today, please share it with someone who might need it too. And if you're enjoying the show, please leave a review. It really does help people find these conversations. And until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and stay emotionally wealthy. I'll see you next time. Oh, hey, quick reminder for you that this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional advice, diagnoses, or treatment. Always consult a qualified professional with any questions you might have.
Thanks to our friends at BuzzSpear for helping with post-production and distribution.